It has been 2 months since my last visit in Iran this April, and I'm still trying to get my head around how things evolved to their current state. Hello, hi, welcome to Panda Politics. I'm Xiaoyu Lu, a scholar of international relations based in Beijing. Today I want to talk about the situation in Iran and the China-Iran relations in the context of the Iranian conflict. So I was in Tehran just weeks before this round of escalation in the Iranian conflict. And what I witnessed on the ground, what I heard from the intellectuals, diplomats, and business leaders there was very different from what we see unfolding now. When I first arrived in Tehran, everything felt ordinary. So yes, the city has endured more than 40 years of the US sanction, but the streets were alive. The local shops were stocked, usually with local substitute for the global goods. And the Iranians were scrolling global news on their smartphones, Gaza, Ukraine, China-US competition. So far from living an isolated life, they actually live in a quite sanctuated information environment. And before I even asked the questions about sanctions from the United States, they firstly asked me about the question of the tariffs on China and how China is going to respond to the US containment. So what are the public sentiment at that time? Over a week in all my meetings, there was a consistent refrain. We have adapted, we have endured, but can we reform? The elder generations in Iran will speak very fondly of the pre-1979 period, a period of relative prosperity and cosmopolitan openness. The younger professionals, however, will lament it on what they call the lost decade. They would point to the skyscrapers in Dubai, a potential new airport in Baghdad, and the high railway system in the neighboring countries. So the incentives for reform mainly come from three sources. The first is economy. The IMF predicted the annual growth of the Iranian economy in 2025 is only about 0.3%. The inflation has gone up for more than 40%, and the food prices have doubled in the past years. So even according to the official minimum wage, which is about $130 per month, this barely covered the minimum in the Iranian daily life. The second one is politics. The protest, the Women Life Freedom protest that began in 2021, still piles beneath the surface, demanding for greater political and social freedoms. And the third one is geopolitics. The war in Gaza, the escalation in South Lebanon, and most recently the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, which has been a long ally of the Iranian regime. This has all triggered a fear in Iran itself and whether it's going to be the next target. This is where diplomacy enters. In April, much of the Iranian elites were not focused on the war, but negotiation with the United States. There was an optimism, cautious but a real one, that the window has opened. Some call it a reverse Kissinger moment. Just like Nixon reached out to Mao in the 1970s, they believe Biden and his successor will make a bold move towards Tehran. So it's clear that Iran does not want war. As its foreign minister later said, I'm rephrasing here, that when he was being asked to return to the negotiation table, he said, when we're in the middle of the negotiation, first Israel attacks us and then the United States attacks us. How can you ask Iran to return to a negotiation when it has never left in the first place? So I think there are two misjudgments that emerge from this engagement. One is from the Western side and the other is from the Iranian side. The misjudgment from the Western side is the belief that the dissatisfaction with the regime will turn into a broader social and political movement. I think yes, the Iranians want to strike a deal with the United States, and yes, they want to engage the West for economic reform, but they do not necessarily want the pro-Western government. What they want is a government with more openness, who can reform the country, and who can put the country in a better regional position, and can reset its relationship with the West. Ironically speaking, with the current escalation, it actually helped the regime to quiet domestic criticism and consolidate the support for the government. The second misjudgment comes from the Iranian side. When Israel has clearly demonstrated the intention to jeopardize the Iran-US talks, Iran still believes that it only needs to focus on the negotiation with the United States, and the problem with Israel just can easily go away. And that miscalculation underlined a broader strategic blind spot. Iran's focus on Washington left it unprepared for regional actors playing by its own rules. And now the China question. The most frequent question which I heard among the Iranians, diplomats and also ordinary citizens is that why isn't China supporting us more? So in Tehran, many fear that the Beijing influence was waning. And to a certain extent, they're right. The Chinese investment and trade with Iran have declined over the years. From 2018 to 22, the total FDI of China in Iran was only 7.5% over the overall FDI in Iran during that period. Bilateral trade even fell from 2022 to 2023. And most importantly, the crude deliveries from Iran to China fell from 1.6 million barrels per day in 2024 to less than a million in 2025. This downturn reflects the Chinese firm's own concerns about the US secondary sanctions and Beijing's own effort to diversify its energy security. Yet Iran still relies on China for about 15% of its oil export. To many Iranians, this is a lifeline. For Beijing, this is a careful balance between securing its energy need and avoiding geopolitical entanglement. So Iran wants to pursue a strategy of hedging. That is, you take advantage of the competition between China and the United States, like many other regional actors. So you can see China's policy stance in here was very cautious during the crisis. It called for political dialogue and stability in the region. This is why the statement protesting the breach of the sovereignty in Iran was met with both frustration and praise in Tehran. So why such restraint? Because Beijing's foreign policy in the region rests on two pillars: non-intervention and energy security. So China can trade with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, and Israel. A diversified approach to secure its market while minimize the risk. So now Beijing can easily highlight the Western double standards without taking sides. The political gain from not intervening is already enough. The Western powers are now the hypocritical ones, with declining political credibilities. As the escalation is a clear violation of the international norms, so now the problem is no longer about the use of force, but about who is using the force and who gets away with it. Yet, there is an uncomfortable reality pervading policy community in Beijing, and that is the old non-proliferation regime is falling apart. Iran's nuclear breakout fears, alongside with the previous case of the Ukrainian nuclear disarmament, all highlighted the same bitter lesson. Small powers without nuclear deterrence can be fatally vulnerable in a time of crisis. China remains committed to non-proliferation treaties, yet is increasingly realized that strategic survival requires more than sanctions and inspections. And that perhaps is the true reflection of the Iranian hedging strategy and China's dilemma. Both sides seek security and autonomy, yet both fear total dependence on external actors. So their relationship is not a partnership of equals, but a pragmatic dance. So where does that leave us? China will not abandon Iran, but I don't think it will save it either. China will endlessly call for political negotiations without risking its own broader interest. China will defend international norms, but will not employ force to uphold them. So China's power in this crisis is most manifested not in bold intervention, but in disciplined restraint. And that, paradoxically, might be the most consequential move of it all. Thank you for listening. This is Xiaoyu Lu. Remember to subscribe to Panda Politics for more unpacking of China's role in global affairs.